And we're live. I'm Anthony Johnson, founder and CEO of 21 Studios, hosting today's episode of 21 Live, a discussion on the red pill, the blue pill, and the Jordan Peterson phenomenon. Today I'm joined by the Red Pill Mafia and 21 Studios Mafia, including Carl from Black Label Logic, Rollo Tomasi, alumni speaker of the 21 Convention, Ryan Stone, alumni speaker of the 21 Convention, and Richard Cooper from Entrepreneurs in Cars and alumni speaker of the 21 Convention. Gentlemen, thanks for joining me today.
Thanks for having us.
Hell yeah.
Thanks for having us.
So this whole discussion, I think I put this idea out maybe a week or two ago to Rollo, and then we kind of brought in these other people along the way too, people from Twitter and other speakers. We wanted to talk about the Jordan Peterson, person and phenomena going on right now. And each one of us has their own ideas on it. Rollo in particular had a kind of bullet point list of things that we really wanted to hit into. Rollo, do you want to kind of kick the ball and get it going?
First I'd like to start out by saying that, for me to say anything critical about someone in the sphere is always going to put a target on me, because everyone's going to say, well, Rollo's insecure, or Rollo is, he has some professional jealousy or something like that. I got the same story when the whole, when my issues went down with Roosh. And I just want to say right now that I don't want this to end up being like, the Bash Jordan Peterson show or anything like that. It's just I think that, nobody's infallible, including myself. And, I've always had an unmoderated comment section on the Rational Mail. I'm always open. If people want to tell me that I'm full of shit, please do. You can tell me that I'm full of shit, and I'm happy to listen to that. And, as long as you got something to back it up, that's fine. Yeah. But I just want to say right now that, personally, I like Jordan Peterson. I've said this on, a dozen different times that I think that if I disagree with him about anything, or if I have any sort of, I don't have a beef with him, but I'd say if there's issues that he brings up that I have a disagreement with, I would say it's maybe 5 to 10% of what he's talking about. Because obviously the guy is not, the internet cultural phenomenon that he's become in a very short time. Because he doesn't know what he's talking about, or he's a lot of people want to apply the red pill or him being woke, and definitely is, most definitely is.
Well, let's talk about that, because a lot of people on the internet and in the manosphere look at Jordan Peterson, they're like, red pill, red pill, red pill, he's red pilled, and that's accurate in some ways, but not in others. And I think a lot of men miss that. So let's talk about that for a second. Is Jordan Peterson red pill, or is he? Yeah, is it more complicated than that for him?
I'm honestly going to disagree with the premise of that. I think, Rollo, was it your thing that you said it's not alpha is not a demographic, it's a behavior set, or how'd you frame it? It was very eloquent.
It's a state of mind. Alpha is not a demographic, it's a state of mind. So is beta. And I think that probably needs to be clarified a little bit as well, is that people always give me shit about saying, oh, well, you use a false dichotomy. You use alpha and beta, and people aren't silverback gorillas, or they're not, wolves or on the, lions on the Serengeti or some bullshit like that. And I'm like, well, yeah.
It's not an archetype.
Yeah, it's, they're placeholder terms. They're alpha and beta, to me, from a red pill perspective, is a placeholder term. It's an abstraction of something like, it when you see it, kind of thing. So yeah, of course not. No, I don't think that at all. But yeah, I get what you're saying as far as alpha is a mindset.
Yeah, you can also it's not if he is or not. It's just he has some behaviors that would be, and then some that aren't. Mm-hmm. But I don't want to. I hate when guys treat it like it's an identity. Like, the whole point of identity politics is that it's ridiculous beyond comprehension. So why you would want to make your own? It's just lost on me.
Well, men also swap like alpha for red pill and beta for blue pill, but you can definitely do blue pill alpha and vice versa. Mm-hmm. So, Jordan Peterson's personal history with his marriage and like that part of his life and dating, I think is very blue pill. From meeting his wife when he was 8 years old and then waiting like 20 something years, over 20 years, to then finally date her and stuff like that. I think she even, if I'm not mistaken, she even almost explicitly identified him as beta, or
yeah.
Jordan, you guys have seen the video I'm talking about, right? Like the way he talks about it, it's very clear.
No, I don't watch the personal life stuff. I usually just watch the lectures.
No, and that's just, I think this is why Rollo says that his life experience for Jordan, it colors his discussion of like intersexual dynamics and feminism and all these things. Mm-hmm. And some of it comes out very good, but some of it's just totally screwy.
Mm-hmm. Well, the video that oh, go ahead, Carl.
No, I was going to say, since this is a red pill sort of angle on it, we all know that there are military men, for instance, who are extremely alpha when they're with their guys or with the team, but they're extremely beta at home. Mm-hmm. And Jordan Peterson manifests a lot of alpha behaviors when he's lecturing on stage or when he's debating, but in his personal life, I suspect it's very different. It's just the changing of the social contexts affect the underlying behavioral variables.
Mm-hmm. Nope. Yeah, I was telling before we came on. I was just saying that, you know, one of the points I wanted to sort of cover here was that he is very much against egalitarianism when it comes to social and political issues, and when it comes to like intersexual dynamics on the outside. But then when you look at his relationship with his wife and his family and everything else, he seems to be very, very egalitarian when it comes to his relationships, and that is something that I noticed, like just what Carl's saying, you know, they can be very, very alpha on the outside. I know so many guys who are very, you know, business owners who are like multi-million-dollar guys who make, you know, split-second decisions and, you know, can be just as ruthless as, you know, as they can be in the boardroom. But then when they get home, it's yes, dear, sorry, dear, you know, and they completely become a different person.
Yeah.
Paper alphas.
Yeah. So Rollo, let's hit on this. What are some of the biggest objections you have to Jordan Peterson talking about intersexual dynamics, talking about men and women, and in particular the men, and particularly the men that are of the age, like millennials and stuff, that see him now as like this father figure?
Well, I think that and this will probably go, you know, to what Ryan was talking about here, is that I think that we are in a state right now socially where men are sort of rudderless. I mean, they don't know what to do with themselves. We call them the lost generation. We call them the boys who are going to go sit home and jerk off to porn and smoke pot and play, you know, World of Warcraft or whatever. And that's that stereotype. I really think that has been exaggerated beyond all reason right now, but you get what I'm talking about. There is a definite generation of young men right now who are, you know, underemployed or unemployed. And we have another generation of women who are out there. You know, if you look at the statistics for college, and you look at the statistics for employment, and you look at the statistics, just the gender statistics for basic involvement of women versus men right now, there's an article or a book, I believe, was called The End of Men. I think it was written by Hannah Rosen. And this was back in like 2012. And she was predicting exactly where we're at right now as far as, you know, men in society. It's the end of men, and men are becoming obsolete. And so you've got this generation of guys who have no function. They have no utility. And as men, that's kind of what we need. We're problem solvers. We need to be out there building things and creating things and doing stuff. But we're, you know, at every opportunity, we're told that we're evil for wanting to do that. We're evil for being men. And so not only are we
young men today too are like the first generation, like completely raised by feminism.
Exactly.
Like multiple generations in a row now is where we're at.
Yeah, well, I mean, we're talking. Yeah, we're 4 or 5 generations in from the sexual revolution right now, and I think that the appeal that Jordan Peterson has is to these guys, because he's giving them a direction. He's saying, go make your bed, go, you know, pick yourself up and stand up and, you know, stick your chest out. And you've probably got the book right there, you know, be a proud lobster and put yourself out there. And I agree with that. I think it's great. That's probably that's probably one of the most threatening aspects of Jordan Peterson that there is, because it's telling men, it's empowering men to go up and stand up and, you know, become men, really. And I think that's great, but I also think that we need to also sort of look at the underlying latent purpose of that too. Is he telling us to be men because he wants us to be, like I say, our mental point of origin, or does he want us to be better slaves.
The manipulated man, essentially.
Exactly. And the number, going through some of these issues here, I think the number one issue that I have with Peterson right now is that he, in every single video I've ever seen him live, or seen him talking, he constantly repeats that life is suffering and life is sacrifice. And those are the two most driving principles Jordan Peterson always comes back to, and it could be any topic really, but it's always life is a struggle. The best men can do is find ways to minimize that suffering. It's a very like Zen prospect. I mean, that's really what the Buddhists teach, is that life is suffering, and you're suffering because you have desires. And I don't think he quite goes that far where it's like you expecting men to be desireless, Zen Buddhists or anything like that. But I want to say the combination between suffering and sacrifice, it seems like the sacrificial side of everything is like, what are we sacrificing for? Are we sacrificing for a greater purpose, or are we sacrificing for ourselves?
Exactly.
If I'm not mistaken, I could be mistaken, but I think what he does with the suffering is he links it to character building. So he thinks that character building absolutely requires, or in majority requires, suffering, which is probably why he keeps harping on it. Mm-hmm. I disagree with that. Maybe it can be useful for that. It can be useful, definitely, but it's not like.
I'm not gonna lie, I kind of do, but that's only because that's exactly how I kind of came up.
I'll throw this out there. This is one of the topics there. This is one of the articles I wanted to discuss. It says men, and it's never women for some reason, must sacrifice part or all of themselves in order to be quote unquote men. Okay, the degree of self-sacrifice is relative to how high a status men can achieve. So, for instance, when he goes into his biblical series, and he's talking about Jesus Christ, and Jesus is the ultimate man because his sacrifice is the archetypal total sacrifice, okay? His tortured death in exchange for eternal life and, of all mankind. I mean, you look at that kind of sacrifice, of course, that Jesus Christ is going to end up being the highest order, but let's back it down a little bit, okay? None of us are Christ, okay? So what are we sacrificing for? Are we sacrificing for the greater good of humanity? And what does that really entail? I really think that the sacrifice aspect and the suffering aspect I don't know. I really think that that's sort of the root of my problem, I think, with much of what he talks about. What about
this phrasing of that? It's that, well, he is fiercely opposed to feminism, but he still is serving the feminine imperative. That's what the suffering for. That's what the suffering for. It's at BFI. But he's also excellent at destroying feminists. So it's like this really odd combination of shit.
Yeah, and then how do you
find? Are you with?
Go ahead.
Go ahead, Carl.
I was going to ask, how familiar are you with Nietzsche? Because Nietzsche has this great quote: "To live is to suffer, and to survive is to find meaning in the suffering." And that's the ethos of Jordan Peterson in a sentence. It's also in Marx, if you know his opiate of the people quote. What it means is that people need religion because there is suffering. Without suffering, you don't need religion, because religion serves as an anesthetic, so to speak, to give meaning to why you're suffering. And once you have that position that if you're alive, you're suffering, then the only thing you can do is to find a reason for why you're suffering. Like there was a group of monks who used to flagellate themselves because they thought in their pain they would be closer to Christ.
Like flagellate?
And their sacrifice.
Flagellate.
Yes. Damn you and your book learning.
Yeah, but I get. Well, go ahead, Carl.
No, the point of it is, if your position is that, the point is, if your position is that you're going to suffer no matter what, you may as well do something to make your sacrifice mean something. Like if you're going to die anyway, you may as well die a meaningful death. But what is a meaningful death? And this leads kind of into my biggest issue, which you touched on earlier in a conversation we had about the Sam Harrison truth position.
Right.
Yeah. Because for me, if you say that the numbers 1 to 10 exist, those are reality. This is an analogy. And you say that, okay, the odd numbers, 1, 3, 5, 7, and 9 are morally right. And the even numbers, 2, 4, 6, 8, and 10 are not morally right. And you say that since only 1, 3, 5, 7, and 9 are morally right, we should ignore all the other numbers.
Yeah. Yeah, I think that
from an epistemological.
Well, what you and I were talking, we should probably recap what we were talking about. Is like when I was watching I watched the Sam Harris and Jordan Peterson. I don't even really want to call it a debate, because really more or less they were agreeing with each other. But I think that the first exchange that they got into was really kind of got bogged down in the idea of what is truth. And so, yeah, well, I mean, I know it sounds really like philosophical.
No, I mean, from theirs, it was just hilarious to watch them just talking over each other and agreeing so argumentatively.
Right, and they're looking for a common definition of truth, which neither of them really share. So they're trying to find some sort of common ground between the two of that. And it's exactly what Carl was just saying, is that you can't, just because there's an objective truth, you can't ignore the objective truth because you think that there's something morally incorrect about it. And I think that that was sort of Sam Harris's, they were supposed to have this really long, involved discussion or debate, and really their very first, 1 hour or 2 hours of their talk was really dedicated to just trying to find this universal truth that they could both, agree upon. And then they could move on from there. And I think that, what Carl is not saying here is that it really comes down to a debate between what is truth and what is meaningful. And I think that Jordan Peterson is more of a guy who's leaning towards meaning, whereas like someone like such as myself or Sam Harris, or we're looking for more for truth. And then what you do with that truth is kind of like you applying your own meaning to it. So if there's, if life is sacrifice or life is suffering, we can argue whether or not that's true or not, but from a meaningful sense, from a meaning, finding meaning within that, we can build a religion on that. We have many religions we can build on that.
Let's bring Richard Cooper on this a bit for a second. Richard, you run a pretty big and very active YouTube channel. Has there been like chatter on your channel about getting Jordan Peterson, or like what men think who follow your channel pretty closely?
Yeah, a lot of guys that watch my stuff do mention his name in the comments. I run a private Facebook community as well, and his name's come up a few times. I link his videos a lot. And I tell them the same thing often is, take it with a grain of salt. The guy's got some good ideas, some good points. There's some value there. I don't find him to, I don't think he's the best version of himself. He's a really interesting guy in the sense that he gets the sexual marketplace. He gets the dynamics of politics. Like, he's a clinical psychologist, and I got a lot of respect for guys like that. But he's also the kind of person that'll take 2 hours to talk about something that might take 15 minutes. And he always uses big words like arithmetic instead of math, right? Mm-hmm. So, I mean, my thing with him is I'm in shock that he's got such a large audience. There's this massive audience of men. I think he said on one of his interviews with somebody that about 80% of his audience is men. And he had
no idea why.
Well, it's not that I don't have any idea why. I mean,
no, he did. He had no idea why.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Like, he makes valid points, and he's filling a void. But I mean, if you look at the comments in his videos, people never say to him, "Jordan, you're like the father I never had," right? He doesn't get into conversations that kind of open that Pandora's box. Whereas that's probably the most common comment that I get in my videos when I'm talking about like a really deep subject that I spent time to research. He's a fascinating guy, and I just wanted to kind of hop in to like hear you guys talk about it, because I know that it was about him and a lot of my audience talks about it, but you're kind of approaching it from a philosophical kind of point of view. And I was kind of interested on your take on his impact on the sexual marketplace today, when it has to do with, men becoming more masculine, men becoming a better version of themselves, men honoring their masculinity. And I don't know that he completely fills that void for me anyway. I mean, I haven't read his book yet. I've watched a lot of his videos, but I find myself turning them off after about 15, 20 minutes, because it's like, dude, just get to the point, right?
That sounds like Richard Cooper. Get to the fucking point, man.
Yeah, I don't think he has any effect on the sexual marketplace at all. I think, and it's I have a term, I call it container words. And when you talk about suffering all the time, that's a container word. You fill it up with whatever you want, and then you throw it at somebody because they have a separate emotional, and it's all the same emotions, but nobody really cares what you feel. Like, for example, what is suffering? If I go to the gym and I work and I, get sore, that's suffering, and it made me better from it. But suffering is also if I sit at home and read books on game but never approach a girl too. So that's the problem. Is that as a theory it all makes sense, but people completely don't apply it. What they do is they justify what they're already doing within that framework, so they can feel noble in their head as some alpha.
Yeah, like I have a bit of a issue that I've started to recognize with myself is I tend to look at people's results that they get out of life. And then I take a look at their choices because their results come from the choices they make, which tells me what their belief system is. He's a guy that suffers himself, right? Like he's a guy that I remember he mentioned on one conversation, I think he was talking to, I don't know if it's Cernovic or who it was. Anyway, he said something along the lines of the University of Toronto has a petition that's being signed, and 200 people signed it because they want to get him thrown out of the school. And he was really upset about it. Like he was visibly hurt and very upset about it. And his son comes along and says to him, well, that's only 200 people, Pops. Why do you care, sort of thing? Like you got 75,000 or 85,000 people, that are your patrons right now. So, there's like small things in life that I notice really derail him from his focus. Yeah. And I find it kind of interesting. Like he's a really fascinating character. Like I'd love to have a conversation with him. I don't know that I could sit there and listen to him for 2 hours though.
Well, I'm going to try to get him to the 21 convention again. You guys don't know this, but I was talking to his team last year and we're working on that. So if it'll happen this year, I have no idea yet. Yeah. But you might just get to hang out with them in Orlando.
I think that'd be great. I think that as far as what Rich was saying about the sexual marketplace right now, I think that probably it goes back to sort of self-improvement, because I think that a lot of guys, when they find the red pill, once they take the red pill and they become red pill aware and they understand a little bit better about intersexual dynamics and they unplug from, their old blue pill conditioning, their next step is generally self-improvement. They want to better themselves and make themselves into, the best person that they can be. Mm-hmm. And, that's where I have always come in and said, hey, look, I think that this day and age, kids, young men, young boys are taught to, hate their own sex and to hate their own gender, because, that it's sort of this social conditioning or social engineering, so that we have like another, the next generation of betas to be these, perfect sacrificing, beta men to, empower and lift up the next generation of women right now. And I think that,
who are all strong and independent and don't.
Yeah, exactly. What I was going to say is that
at the same time.
Yeah, so but they're taught from a very early age to not put themselves as their mental point of origin, which I think is probably the biggest sin, or the biggest part of the blue pill. I think for men, when they are taught at a very early age to put themselves second and to put women on top. And I don't mean just a woman, that later that becomes a woman. Later it becomes the wife. Later it becomes the girlfriend. But in general, it's womankind. It's the sisterhood. Uber Alice is what I call it.
Hang on a second. It's people kind now, eh?
Yeah, people kind, right? But I think that in a way, I kind of am a little bit concerned about the message that Jordan is sort of putting out there. It's like he expects sacrifice. And like I was saying before, he's always, get your shit together, make your bed. And that sounds revolutionary to guys these days, because it's something that they've never really had any, like I said, the rudderless. They're sort of, personality rudderless right now. But like I was just going to say is that it comes back to like, get your shit together. It's also a plea for greater sacrifice. Okay. And I think this sort of goes back to what Rich was saying, is that you're sacrificing, but what are you sacrificing for? Are you sacrificing because you want to improve yourself and be the best person or best man that you can be? Yeah. Or is it because are you sacrificing so that you can be more acceptable and more appropriate for womankind, just like you've been taught from as early as 5 years old? And like I said, is a plea for greater sacrifice, because if a man is less valuable, his sacrifice is less meaningful. So are you improving yourself because you want your sacrifice to be that much more? And do you think it's actually going to be appreciated because you've made yourself into somebody who's that much better?
A fattening of the pig before slaughter. It's like the pig is nice.
Is that where it's going, or is it because, like I said, it's like the sacrifice is less meaningful if you're beta than it is if you're an alpha? And he even talks about that. It's like when it comes to like harmless men versus harmful men. And a harmless man is always going to be less valuable, or socially, intersexually, than a harmful man, or somebody who has the potential for harm, but he doesn't use that harm. He has all of this confidence, and he has all this capacity and this agency, but yet he doesn't do anything with it. He sacrifices that and expecting. I mean, what is he expecting to happen from that? To be appreciated.
I totally agree with that. Jordan Peterson. Well, to me, Jordan Peterson is about building a better beta bear.
That's what
building a better
exactly. Yeah, you totally nailed it with that.
Well, one of the concepts too that I haven't seen. Go ahead, Carl.
Well, I wrote 2 essays recently where I used some of his terms, such as conscientiousness and the big 5 factors. And one thing few people don't know is that Charles Manson, Richard Ramirez, and Ted Bundy got love letters and naked pictures from women left and right while either charged with or convicted of multiple murders. And what Jordan Peterson is doing, he's trying to plug the gap, because right now we have a lot of highly educated, highly ambitious, strong, independent women who are not going to be able to find husbands. Because women don't marry down. A college-educated woman rarely marries a non-college educated man. Relationships between men where men make less than women don't last. So he needs the men to step up. Otherwise, we're going to have a shortfall of, not of men, but of appropriate level men for these women to marry.
So it's like a grand scale Captain Savaho kind of thing.
Yeah, like when you say build a better beta, it's almost like he wants to carbon copy his own life, right?
Yeah.
Well, he does. Because what Jordan Peterson says, his major thing is order and chaos. If you listen to his Bible series, the chaos is the id in Freudian terms. It knows how to do 4 things: eat, sleep, fuck, and fight. Those are the 4 things. Then you have the superego, which is telling you, okay, you need to behave correctly, you need to get an education, you need to be a productive member of society, etc. And then your ego negotiates between these 2, like, okay, you know what, if you earn $100,000 this year, you can go buy a high-class escort, or if you do this job, you are entitled to a wife. And this is a negotiation that goes on within all of us. But when you blow this up to a societal scale, what happens is, if you have a lot of super ego-heavy guys, they're never going to get laid ever, and the id-driven guys are going to get laid. And if the big 5 heritable traits that get those guys laid, like assertiveness and dominance, are the antithesis of those traits that society needs, which is conscientiousness more than anything, then order will lose the battle to chaos, and we'll end up with tribes of warlords everywhere.
It's dogs and cats, utter madness, chaos.
Well, here's something I wanted to inject into the conversation, based on conversations with Rollo I've had in private, and then Ryan a little bit with the tweets he was talking about earlier. We had a speaker a couple years ago, you guys don't know, an alumni speaker a couple times, about what he called father hunger. And I think that father hunger, is the niche that Rollo mentioned that Jordan Peterson has so incredibly fit himself into very rapidly and surprisingly, I think, to himself and everyone else. And now everyone's like, holy shit, this guy's blown up. Because, all these young men are my age anyway, and are on this age, are like super, super father hungry. And so that's why everybody's freaking out when you like make your bed and they're like, oh my God, amazing. Like, just what my mother told me for 30 years. Yeah.
Well, it's funny. It's like, I don't know if you guys know, I don't know if any of you guys have been in the military or anything, but I recently saw this video about, I forget who it was, but you're saying about how they teach, cadets to make their bed to like this perfect standard. every morning, and that, at least when they come back, they had a shitty day, then they come back to, a made bed, and it's like the first small accomplishment of the day to, hopefully be one of many greater accomplishments later on. And this is something that's been, really been taught in the military for quite some time.
Yeah.
But
right from
if you're not in the military, you don't really know that. And or it might seem like a really stupid, trivial, habit that you have to do, but it's really actually very important. And to expose. Yeah, exactly. And to expose men, the lost generation of boys, right, and the lost boys to something as it seems very trivial, but it's actually very important. Yeah, I can understand how that would seem very, very revolutionary.
Yeah.
Having said that, when I deployed, I was the guy with the absolute shitty rack. So once you're out of basic training and on your 3s courses, they don't really check anymore.
Mm-hmm. Well,
yeah, it's just
I just also wanted to say that, like, I think, like I said, it's really hard to criticize the guy in any substantial way, because if you do that, he, like we're just saying, he has such a following right now that anything, I don't want to say, it's not even really derogatory, even just anything like marginally critical means, suddenly that you are, you're against him, or you're aligning yourself with the feminists and the SJWs if you have anything critical to bring up about it.
We're all committing high treason right now.
Yeah,
being critical in any way, shape, or form about Jordan, who I think is I like him. Like, I think this guy's awesome.
But isn't that just a sign of the times of, like, the society that we live in, that we've got this massive audience of men and even some women that look up to a guy that sounds like Kermit the Frog when he goes on a rant?
Mm-hmm.
I mean, it's a step closer to, being better, being more masculine, being the best version of yourself than where they were before that, obviously. But it just shows how far behind, we've come as a society, I think.
Mm-hmm.
But are they a better version of themselves, though? Like, are they? Like, I really think about this, and you watch them, and guys talk about self-improvement's another container word, totally.
Mm-hmm.
Don't worry about chicks, bro. It's self-improvement. And you're like, well, self-improvement how? Like, what are you improving for? If you just sit there and think you're getting better, but there's nothing real that you can test it against, then you're just LARPing.
Yeah.
Live action.
Ryan, there's a lot of talk. There's definitely a large echo chamber.
You had actually one of the things that prompted me to try to organize this with you, Ryan, is that you had that one post or that one, gosh, it was up to like 300 some odd comments last I looked at it, but it was about you weren't even post? You weren't even like critical so much of Jordan Peterson, just so much about the I don't want to call it a cult, but certainly the zealous following that he has right now, and just by being in some way marginally critical. I mean, can you talk about that for a minute?
That was hilarious. Yeah, we Gay Lou Boyle and Guy Whisper, who did the thing, was essentially had the idea that these guys are treating him like Dad 2.0. So just send a little jab out. We call him like, and all it was just, he's not your friend. He has his own thing he likes to do. He has his own agenda. Like you were saying, being your masculine point of origin. Like, you don't need a dad. And then people lashed out thinking we were ragging on Peterson, and it wasn't. It was on people that are following him unconditionally. It's like, no, that's not how it works. Like, when you turn 18,
that's exactly, you hit the nail on the head. It's unconditional following at this point, a lot of it.
Like, you're not supposed to have a dad. You're supposed to take that risk that you are now like on your own. There is no safety net for you.
Mm-hmm.
Dad's not going to bail you out. Peterson's not your dad. He's not your best friend. He's a guy who's a clinical psychologist who studied a bit of Jung and had some Bible stories he told for a Patreon fund.
Mm-hmm.
And if you watch it, you see it too, because his clinical psychology stuff's awesome. Very red-pilled information. His Bible stuff completely different.
We just got a great comment. They're saying so many retarded things, my fingers can't keep up.
Mm-hmm. Such as,
I will say this because I do got to bounce in a few minutes. I got about 2 feet of snow to get off my driveway before I can get out of here. But one of the biggest values and one of the biggest takeaways that I've had from Peterson's work is he's got a self-authoring suite. I don't know if any of you guys have done it or seen it.
I've seen it.
Familiar with
yes, you've got past authoring and future and so on and so forth. And I did one of these self-authoring suites. It was about a year ago. It was around the time that I read Rollo's book, the first version of The Rational Male. And I got a lot of value out of it. Like, it took me almost a day and a half to go through the exercise. So he's got a lot of good pieces of content out there. But again, I think that guys specifically need to be selective and adapt it. And especially after that, plug it in and use it, man. Like, stop, watching him beat the crap out of somebody that's trying to corner him on a television show like Kathy Newman and praising it over and over again. It's like, apply it to your life, man, and start acting.
Yeah.
Pretty much.
Anyway, guys, I got to bounce. I want to thank you for doing this. I'm going to watch the recording later. I want to get back. I'll see you guys later. Right? Peace.
Thanks for hopping on, man. See you.
I think the self-authoring suites.
Mm-hmm.
And one of the things that I got really uncomfortable with about that self-authoring suite was it reminded me a lot of Scientology auditing.
Yeah.
Oh.
Holy shit.
Yeah. So you can reach clear.
Oh, all right.
Well, the major difference is that when you're doing a Scientology audit, you're basically telling the story of your life down to the minute details while holding on to some tin cans with another person.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, but they're sweet cans.
And figure out your engrams.
Well, everyone loves having their hands on some good cans, but
yeah,
that's besides the point.
Well,
the point here is that what.
No, go ahead, Carl.
I think the key to self-authoring is it allows you to familiarize yourself with parts of your history that you haven't really learned the lesson from. Like, everyone has bad experiences that kind of follows them, and by writing them down and thinking about them, you can usually get past them. It's a very classic psychological technique when you're trying to heal trauma in people.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, well, he even talked about that on his first Joe Rogan podcast, is that if you're still having an emotional reaction to a memory, that means you can't articulate it. And the part about writing that's good is that it allows you to articulate it. And we see it all the time. All these field reports from married red pill guys with dead bedrooms, wife won't fuck them, or whatever their problems are. It's like, as they start writing in their own your shit threads and that, they start articulating what the issue is. Other men ping off them, and then, they come to terms with it. And then it's just it doesn't really emotionally sway you anymore. So you're not flying off the handle every time somebody throws a little trigger word at you.
We have a question, by the way, from the audience, the live audience here. It's a good one. I think we already hit on a little bit, but it's worth going over again. So Steel Sharpens is his name, and he said, so thoughts if you guys think that Jordan Peterson is actively looking to be a father figure, or did guys just latch on to him because of his message?
100% latched on.
Yeah, I think so too. And that he is what they've been looking for, and that's one of the reasons I think that guys in the manosphere, I don't even want to say so much red pill community, because red pill has the term red pill has sort of been bastardized. When I talk about red pill, I talk about it from an intersectional dynamics perspective. But I think that from a manosphere perspective, I think he is the champion that these guys have been looking for a long time. He'll go head to head with the gender pronoun guys. He'll go head to head with a really, hostile, bitchy, feminist in Kathy Newman. And it's great. I mean, that was a glorious 20 minutes to watch her, take a hit, and I just watched the part of the Vice interview. Vice and HBO just did this documentary on him, and I haven't seen the whole thing, but I've seen clips and bits and pieces of it where I think that probably the meat of the whole thing was him being interviewed by this. Somebody told me he was the gay Asian token gay Asian on Vice. I don't know, because I don't watch Vice. But
knocking all the boxes in there.
But exactly. But I mean, here he is basically. I mean, this guy is a kid. I mean, the guy doing the interview can't be more than 24, 25 years old. Probably fresh out of college. Probably fresh out of learning his gender, indoctrination and learning all that, and trying to catch somebody like Jordan Peterson. And Peterson's just there, ripping him a new one. It's not even really a fair fight, but people like that. They like that WWF, fighting that goes on between, somebody from one ideological perspective and then the polar opposite of that. And we like to see that. That's why his, the videos of him on campus where, transsexuals come up to him and want to put him on the spot, and he either dodges them, effortlessly, or he puts it back on them and they have nothing to talk about. And that is the guy that, that the manosphere has been wanting for a long time. They want that guy who's going to go head to head like that, particularly somebody as educated as Jordan Peterson is. So did he want to be that? I don't know. I don't think he set out to do that. And I think that Carl and I were talking about this not too long ago, and also Illimitable Man. He's the perfect guy in the perfect place at the perfect time right now.
Yeah.
And he whether or not he wants to be a father figure makes no difference. There's still going to be guys who are going to want to put that on him, because he's the perfect intellectual guy to fill that void, to feel that he's the champion that they want. Even if he's not a father, at least he's a fighter, and he goes out there and he has skin in the game. I mean, he has got a lot of skin in the game, because he's probably going to lose his tenure. And I think he knows that. And I think right now Peterson is preparing for a life, post, tenured professorship. And he's doing a great job of it. I mean, the guy can, I was just talking with Pat Campbell on his show just this week, saying that, he is, he can go and put, 2,000 asses in the seats, or 3,000 asses in the seats, and talk about, the Bible and everything. And yet pastors are completely confused as to why they can't get men, more and more, enough men, or any men, into the church for free on a Sunday. And yeah, exactly. And then what I was going to say is that they, these pastors are really upset because they think that he's like heretical, or he's not religious enough for them, which I can understand, because he sort of has a very, I want to say, objectivist way of looking at religion right now. He's never really said yes. I shouldn't say that. He has said that he doesn't go to church, and he's kind of anti-going to church because it really grates on him for some reason. But yet he's still a biblical scholar. He's still a biblical guy who's going to go out there, and people are going to pay good money so that they can go out and hear him speak. And it's like he's giving men, or he's giving young men, something that they're not getting in church, that they probably used to get in church, but they're not getting that anymore. And so where do these guys go? They go to the manosphere. They go to Jordan Peterson. They go to whatever ideological, or maybe they go to white nationalism. Maybe they go to something that's, that's a little more along their political ideological lines, but they're looking for something. And whether he's that father or not, I don't think that's really sort of relevant right now. He is. That's who he is right now, and he's got to figure out what he's going to do in that persona.
All right.
Hey, go ahead and read those. Any of the questions there. I was just going to say one more thing here, is that just sort of on my list is, I don't know if you guys have seen this as well, but he's got a quick hit video for Prager University right now, where he goes in, and it's pretty much everything he's always said. He's not really going against anything, he's not being a hypocrite or anything by doing that. But I think that it's interesting that for him to go and align himself with Prager University it's kind of telling as far as where he wants to be ideologically right now. Because I don't know if you know anything about PragerU or
nobody does.
Yeah, nobody knows anything about PragerU. I was going to say he's definitely aligning himself with the TradCon agenda by doing so, and maybe there's some crossover that he thinks is beneficial, but I don't know. I don't know what's going on as far as that's concerned. But I think there's probably some people who are in the live chat right now are saying, well, I love TradCon or whatever, but I think that it sort of shows the alignment. As far as ideologically is concerned, is where he fits.
Let's talk about this, and I think Carl is the one. Go ahead, Carl.
Yeah, Carl.
No, I was just looking at the chat here, and there's a guy named Siddharth Tanwar who just said that they are looking for order. Yeah, I know. I probably butchered that name.
Are these guys you know?
I'm watching the chat. No, I was looking at the chat while we're talking.
Yep.
And I think that's a very valid point, because one of the things I've noticed with the TradCons is they want a predictable cause and effect. They want to know, if I do A, I get B.
They want a bubble wrapped life.
That's kind of it's essentially the old 1950s put into a time capsule, because they want to be able to know that if I graduate high school, I can get a predictable job that I can have for 35 years. I'll get a girl who's maybe not a 10, but she'll be a 5 to 7 and be loyal to me. She'll bring me children. I won't have to worry. And it has to do with elimination of risk.
Mm-hmm.
Because alpha men accept a higher level of risk and have a higher level of tolerance.
Mm-hmm.
But beta men want to eliminate the volatility of the sexual marketplace. That's why I've called it reproductive communism on a lot of occasions, because what they want to do is, whenever you have a free market, you will have losers, you'll have winners, and you'll have a lot of people in the middle doing all right. So you have the alpha who bangs 100 women, you have the beta who hits a notch count of 5, and you have the, let's call them the incel crowd, that hits 0. But in reproductive communism, you basically assign one man to one woman, and then it goes from there, because you take all the natural variables in a market that cannot be predicted, and you organize them in a way that's predictable, understandable, and where there's a clear bullet point checklist to what you have to do to get laid.
Where's the fun in any of that?
Yeah. Well, I was going to say
you have so much more fun with a little bit of risk and danger in life. It makes you more interesting, gives you better character. It's cleaning your room. I don't know. I just don't get why you'd want to bubble wrap your life like that, and then you think you're winning when all you're essentially doing is just you're turning food into waste.
Well, it
like
kind of
it's not about you thinking you're winning. It's about nobody losing.
Yeah.
Because for a guy who accepts risk, he's willing to say, okay, I'm willing to take an 80% chance that I'll lose in exchange for a 20% chance that I'll win. A
Just
guy
do it 5
who
times.
takes risk is going to do the opposite. He's going to do the opposite thing, and he's going to say, I'm willing to say I'll have a 99% chance I'll lose, and I'll take that over the 1% that I'll win. You could give a guy who's risk averse a 99% chance of winning, and he'll still not take it because that 1% is more significant to him.
Yeah.
That's why they want Father Peterson, because that's the risk mitigation right there. Well, he's my dad. He's got this.
Well, I think one of the other things is here is like we're looking at, sort of this political insertion of a political ideological bent into what we know as red pill. And I think that what I'm seeing right now recently in my Twitter feeds and my comments and stuff like that is I see a definite, well, certainly on the red pill sub, there's a certain faction of guys who want to save the world, or they want to save Western culture by getting married, by having kids. And I just did a podcast with Hunter Drew and Craig James about, being a red pill parent and being a red pill husband. I'm not saying that's not necessarily an endorsement for guys to run out there and go get married right away, because I'm certainly not going to endorse that. And
man up and marry those sluts. Hurry up, boys.
Marry those sluts. And that's I think that's one of the dangers really of taking too much Jordan Peterson, is that it gets you wrapped up into this, well, I'm going to go get married, I'm going to save the world, because what do we need? We need the nuclear family. We need 1 man, 1 woman, and 2 kids. And that's going to put us back. We need to get back to our positive reproduction rates. And if we don't do that, well, or if you're not working towards that, or if you're not willing to sacrifice, that's where the sacrifice comes back in again. If you're not willing to sacrifice yourself for that, well, there's something wrong with you, or that's the direction that you shouldn't be going in. And I think that, like I'll tell you this right now. I have a really, really good marriage. Okay. I have a fantastic marriage. I'm telling you right now, don't get married. Okay. And if I'm telling you that, because the state of marriage right now is such that it is so dangerous, economically, familially, family wise, there's just legislation. We live in such a feminine primary social order right now that is that what we're sacrificing for? And that's kind of what I wanted to get back to on the sacrifice issue is, am I expected to go and take that chance no matter what? Am I expected to go and put my freaking nuts on the anvil and give the hammer to the woman? Because is I mean, because is that going to? Am I supposed to do that as a sacrifice that I think is going to be appreciated in the future, or is it because it won't be appreciated that it's even that much greater a sacrifice? And I think that the parallel between guys who are saying, you know, you need to man up and you need to get married and you need, I mean, how is that any different from what, you know, somebody like Pastor Mark Driscoll is saying, you know, and trying to shame guys into marrying single mothers and, you know, always giving the women the best benefit of the doubt and putting themselves, you know, like saying, you know what, guys, I know it's risky. I know it sucks. I know that, you know, it's everything MGTOWs tell you not to do. I know it's risky. I know you're completely, you understand the risks, but you're still going to go do it anyways because it's worth it. Eventually, you know, for mankind, it's going to be worth it.
That reminds me of something you pointed out. I think it was you the other day, Rollo, that pointed it out. There was a video that Jordan put out, or someone did, of Jordan talking to somebody. He lists off, like, you know, 57 things men have to do to, like, own their shit, you know, take care of themselves and all that. And then for the women, it's like one or two things. So
put
men
down the fork.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, exactly. So it's like put down the fork, and men have like 57,000 things we have to do. And then it's a big disconnect, I think, from what he pretends to preach otherwise, or maybe not pretends, but is otherwise putting out. So, Rollo, can you kind of hit on that, like, a blind spot or somebody?
I was going to say, how is that different from that old joke that why is a woman who sleeps with a lot of men a slut, but a man who sleeps with a lot of women a player? And the thing is, in order to be a player, you have to be in shape, you have to have your game on point, you have to have some level.
Yeah. Well, I think
what do you have to do in order to sleep with a lot of men? You have to be available.
Yeah, it takes more effort to not fuck men if you're a woman versus the other way around.
Well, like what Carl was saying just a minute ago is, you know, as far as he's got a great book. If anybody hasn't read this, Gendernomics, fantastic. Please pick that up. I'll be the first one to tell you to go get that because it's statistics and it's every site sorted kind of. Sources cited, really good book. But what I was going to say is that from an economics, from a marketplace standpoint, like what we were just saying, isn't, and maybe this is a question for all of you guys, isn't monogamy and marriage, is that not sort of a balancing of the market? Is that not, you know, being with one man and one woman and then opening up, you know, that much more for other guys? I mean, I really think that, you know, marriage in the Judeo-Christian modern Western way that we think of it is really sort of a balancing or sort of an evening of that market. As opposed to, I mean, as much as it can be. I mean, from a social point. I mean, obviously, women are going to cuckold guys. Okay, that's part of hypergamy. It's always going to be that. If they can't get the best of both worlds, they're going to try to balance it in some particular way.
It's part of evolution. It's happened. Yeah, it's happened forever.
But like I got a post right now, and it was I think it was the last part of the Creeps post, or was one of these posts, just basically saying that we've come to a point right now where hypergamy has become so unfettered and so unleashed right now that we're sort of going back to that polygamous attitude because women's the beta provider, the provider, parental investment, the security needs of hypergamy are being met either directly or indirectly through men themselves or through the state or through some sort of anything that women can vote for legislatively to ensure that security side of hypergamy is made up and they don't have to worry about that. So what's left? The alpha fucks, the alpha seed side of things. And so in a society where hypergamy pretty much dictates what's going on in a social sense, you know, we talk about, you know, women being single mothers, 42% of women having children out of wedlock. We look at, you know, the state of abortion right now. All of this stuff that's happened since the sexual revolution is indicative, I think, of the switch that we have in unfettering hypergamy, and it's sort of freed women up to just focus on the alpha seed side of things. And I think that marriage and monogamy, in the post-agrarian sense, that really, like I said, even the market out. It settled the market down so that, you know, one man can have one chick, whereas in a post-hypergamous society, women are going to look for as many guys as they can. That's why we get like something like the Sandberg plan for hypergamy, right? So it's go out and have sex with all the bad boys and all the bad for you guys, and then once you're all tapped out and you're ready to cash out of the sexual marketplace, find the beta, and then and then go from there. I think that in today, I think one of the reasons that we're seeing such a drop in marriage rates, and we're looking at marriage ages getting older and older as a direct result of that right now. But I think what we're doing is we're sort of coming back to the polygamy side of things through hypergamy.
Well, at the same time, if I'm not mistaken, maybe Carl knows more about this, millennials are having it's easier to hook up technologically than it ever has been. Tinder's, and I have right now, my Tinder, 400 matches. So it's easier than ever to hook up with women, but at the same time, millennials are having less and less and less sex than ever before, if I'm not mistaken on that. And I think that's
principle.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, well, it's getting, so the alpha side of the equation now is getting so fucking high, next level, that if you're not at that level or close to it, you're just totally out of the game.
That's why I find clean your room to be ridiculous advice. Go to the gym. Right there, you're just given a clear roadmap to have all the options in the world. Be that top 20 guy. And it's not hard because half the guys have just dropped out.
Well, that's what I'm saying. It's not even top. Yeah. I think 20 years ago, it was top 20. And now it's top 10 or top 5. It's that window, the Pareto window is closing. It's you have to be more and more and more and more fucking alpha.
Right.
Every year that goes by.
But most guys double down on not. They're cleaning their room right now and looking for dads online.
Yeah.
No, but actually, Rollo just went on kind of a thing that there were multiple things I want to touch on in there. Number one is the question, monogamy, one man, one woman. Yes, in theory, you'll have a market clearing, meaning that supply matches demand, because population birth rates are roughly 51% women, 49% men. So theoretically, you should be able to match everyone up if you put in a communist lottery of sorts where you just paired people the hell up. But once you start accounting for divorce rates, widows and widowers, etc., you have a market where you have a certain proportion of the total group returned to the free market at all times. And one of the things very few people realize about capitalism is capitalism inherently wants monopolies, because the one who is the best at competition will eventually have 100% of the market. That's why we have antitrust laws, to say that, okay, you know what, we accept that you have the absolute best product in the market, but we cannot allow you to have an 80% market share, because that throws off competition, and that means you can realize above average profits for a below average product. So what happens is, at present, you have appealing to 80% of the female markets. A fun OkCupid statistic, if I remember it correctly, is that the top 78% of women are going after the top 20% of men on that platform. And the bottom 80% of men are going after the bottom 20% of women, which is the Pareto principle in action. And what this means is simply that women's needs, other than high quality genetics, is gone, because you can have everything else covered by either yourself or the states.
Well, either it's gone or the illusion is gone. It's a pretend it's not there. The world is still very fucking dangerous, but they don't recognize that. They have zero awareness of it.
But people don't realize how fragile a modern grand scale economy and state actually are. So they think this is the way. People always tend to project the future based on what they've experienced. So if you've never experienced a depression or a riot or any form of real danger, you tend to project, okay, this is how the world is now. This is how it's always going to be. And you act in the moment.
You remember that saying, the market can stay irrational longer than you can stay solvent?
What was that? You kind of
Yeah, well, the market can stay irrational longer than you can stay solvent. Just the way, and honestly, that's the thing. The big part of the Peterson followership that I'm not a fan of, and it's a general beta behavior across everything, is that people keep complaining that, well, it should be this. Well, it's not that. You guys have basically given out 100% roadmap to a perfectly good masculine-centered life. Be that top 20% guy, because everybody else is dropping off the radar like flies. Build up your options, act in a place of abundance. And right now, the government and other organizations have taken all your need for provision off the table, so you don't have to focus on being a great plow horse. It's like right there for the taking. And all you have to do is be willing to accept you're going to fail once or twice before you nail it.
I had a girl on Tinder the other day say that I am the definition of a Tinder fuckboy. Which so it harps on what you're saying. Like that, it is a successful strategy at this point. It's what you should be doing to at least some big extent, assuming you're not hypercultured for some very specific set of behaviors in life. Like,
look at, and you got like a great business going on right now. You're making a decent amount of money. You'd be a great husband material for anybody, but that's for you. So now you don't even have to worry about offering that up to other people. You just
Tinder fuckboy to the max.
Yeah. Well, I was going to say look at Tinder itself. We're going to make an app to facilitate hypergamy. That's what we're going to do. I mean, we're going to find some way that we can have women just simply go, no, 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 yes, no, no, no. And that's all it's boiling down to at this stage. I wanted to talk with about what Carl was saying, is that when I was writing that one article, it was really in response to me reading this other one about polygamy and polygamy would be the best word for it, but now it's polyandry, I guess. But if you look at the countries that have a social order that's built around polygamy, those are always the most depressed third world hellhole, shithole countries that you would ever want to go to. So you're looking at like places like Somalia, or you're looking at places like that, where they're trading cows for women. And we're looking, most of these are, like I said, shithole countries, but they base their social order around having multiple wives, and the way that a guy can be higher status is to simply have more wives, because that means he's got more money to go and do that. And like, really, what does ISIS offer these guys to join up? They offer them wives. They can't find any other way to pay these guys off, because what are they going to do? Offer them cows so they can go buy wives? And so anyways, this article was talking about how, like, say, the Arab Spring. The Arab Spring. Are you reading something?
No, I'm laughing at the cow thing. I got to mute for a second.
Well, it was the Arab Spring. They were saying that is a result of young men being unemployed and being really where we're at right now, sort of in a sense here in the United States right now. Young men between the ages of, say, 18 and 26, 27 years old, unmarried, no prospects for being married. Most of them are, I'd say here, are either educated, certainly better educated than most other countries. But like in the Arab Spring, these guys were pretty educated guys, but had no prospects at life. So why not riot in the streets? Why not join ISIS? Why not, try to overthrow the government? Because you have nothing. I mean, you've got nothing to lose for doing that, and probably everything to gain. And I think what that really comes back to, again, is what we're saying in this country is we have another situation that's very similar to that. We've got the Lost Boys generation, who we were just discussing earlier. And what do they latch onto? They latch onto the Jordan Peterson. They latch onto guys in the manosphere. They latch onto whatever ideology that sort of gives them hope or gives them a prospect.
It's a lot of big YouTubers. It's not just Peterson. It's like Stefan Molyneux, I think, is another good one. His channel is also about the same size. Scott Adams, yeah.
Yeah, I mean, you look at guys that even look at Cernovich, or you look at Rogan's another good one.
Rolo, you're just bitter and jealous.
I'm just bitter and jaded. It's professional at being
angry, but stop. No.
Yeah. Well, I was going to say is that
what Rolo says about the polygamy is actually very interesting, because what I thought it was CEO salaries versus worker salaries. Because there was always a huge outrage when a CEO is making 100 times what an average worker makes. And that's the same situation you have in those countries, because you have one person or a small group of people who are making a lot of wives, and you have some that don't get any. But the work of, if you can get, let's say, 60% of your population to invest in and work to build value within your civilization, then you have a really great outcome, because you have a hell of a lot of workers creating value. If you have maybe 10 guys working and creating value, you have a lot less. So in a shithole situation, to borrow a term from Trump, you find yourself that only really 10% of men have any reason whatsoever to invest in your civilization, and the other 90% may just as well sit down, collect something from the government, play video games, smoke weed, and watch porn. There's really no point for them to invest. If you can get 60% of men a wife, then 60% of men will have a mortgage. Then 60% of men will have to pay that mortgage. And if they have kids, then they'll have to pay for those kids. So they have to work a hell of a lot more to have a decent life than if they were single men. You can get on at about $25,000 a year as a man if you're single. If you're married, that jumps to about 60, 70 grand a year.
And
I don't think that's going to change either.
Too.
Yeah.
Good.
Well, I was going to say is that I think that even when you get to that state of marriage, and I really think that's sort of one fault I have with Peterson, is that everything is about getting into this perfect, and I think, and he promotes egalitarianism within his marriage, but I think he thinks getting into this perfect marriage where the woman is going to be your perfect helpmate, or at least your equal, very similar to what Sheryl Sandberg was talking about, how there's nothing sexier than the guy who wants to pull his own weight. And I think that when you look at the incentives for marriage right now, I can understand why guys are resisting that. So it's just like what Carl was saying here. You got this generation of porn, weed, and video games. You got that generation who have no real prospect, and you're going to try to tell them to give that up, man up, and then put themselves into a sacrificial position of marriage where in all likelihood 50% of marriages are going to end up in divorce, and they're going to be in a worse position post marriage than they were when they are in that marriage. And that's just statistically across the board, an unfortunate truth about Western marriage.
We need to point out that bad position after marriage could be so severe it could include suicide.
Exactly.
That's how far down that fucking rabbit hole. It's not just like your life gets wrecked, you lose access to your kids, more than half your shit gets stolen, your reputation is tarnished. A lot of guys fucking kill themselves. Yeah. So it goes pretty far down.
I'm not gonna say that marriage hasn't been in the past and couldn't be in the future a good means to build a society upon, because obviously that's what we've done here. And I'm not into nation building or anything, but I will say that the nuclear family and everything that we've had up until probably the sexual revolution, at least as far as I'm concerned, has been at least some. I mean, we can see the achievements and everything all around us. I still think hypergamy has been a big part of that, but right now there's no incentive for men to get married because it's all risk and it's all downside. You're going to have kids that are never going to be your own. You're going to lose half of your stuff. And then on top of that, in all likelihood, you'll be working till the day you die to fund and basically a resource transfer to women, or a woman or women for the rest of your life. So yeah, who's going to sign up for that? It's the same thing that I think Dr. Helen, I can't remember her last name, but she has this
Helen Smith.
Helen Smith talking about the marriage strike. It's no strike. It's just guys being pragmatic. I mean, it's just deductive reason.
Rational. Well, here's a question I have for all of you. We all have seen a lot of Jordan Peterson videos together. Who knows how many dozens of or hundreds of hours, right? Mm-hmm. He has to be aware of these dangers to at least some extent with marriage in the West. Has anyone ever seen him criticize or warn men about those dangers, Jordan Peterson? I never have.
I don't think he knows them.
No.
I don't think he knows them at all.
Does he even know?
I would put that question out to the people in the chat right now, because I haven't. I
haven't either. Yeah, it just occurred to me. I'm like, I've never fucking seen that.
In fact, if anything, he has always been very, very shaming of men and very, beneficial and very praising of women. I don't think I've ever heard him. I mean, he's talked. It's just sort of as asides, he'll say, yeah, well, the nature of women, X, Y, and Z. But he's always focused on the man, and it's always focused on getting that guy to go make his bed and shame the guy and to a greater respect. And maybe that's what they need. Maybe that's what they were looking for. Maybe they're looking for that kick in the ass, and he's the one that gave it to them. But yeah, I don't think I've ever seen him even address the dangers of marriage, because why would he? He married his 8-year-old sweetheart. You know, I've said this before, and I'll throw this out there right now to anybody here in the live chat. It's like I've said that he is still, when it comes to women, he is still that 8-year-old kid. He's still that 8-year-old boy who fell in love with that girl and told his father, I'm going to marry that girl. And whoa, we have this nice, high school sweetheart, teenage years, miracle story of this great marriage. And, I saw that same video as anybody else, where it was saying, even his wife thought he was beta and was not going to take his last name until he sort of at least, manned up enough to say, no, you're going to take my name.
Yeah. And well, she married him too, right before hitting the wall, I think, right? 28, 29. So,
I wish I don't know that for fact, but I think so.
I think that's how it lines up from my recollection of that video. So I could be wrong, but I think that's how it actually played out. 100% rational. Go ahead, Carl.
Well, it's one of those funny things that I've joked around a few times that, a spoonful of sugar makes the medicine go down, but in order to swallow the red pill, someone really has to kick you in the balls. Because if you've never had to, I know a lot of blue pill guys who married a girl while they were fairly young, and they've kept that marriage together for, 30, 40, 50 years. And if you're in that situation, you've never been exposed to the downside, because you've never had to think about them. An old mentor of mine said it when I started doing stock investments, that, I'm quite happy with the fact that your first investment went to shit, because if that had gone really, really well, then you would have had an unrealistic image of how the stock market works.
Carl, there's something someone put in the chat here that I wanted to ask you about, because I've seen you write about it, and I've talked to you about it in person, or not person, but privately, that I think you really hit the nail on the head with. We have Siddharth Tanwar is back in the chat, and he says that Jordan Peterson's go-to trope is to accept as much responsibility as possible, which kind of reminds me of the Jesus complex you were talking about, and how men are prone to that, to just maximize responsibility. It's important, then sacrifice and all that goes along with it. Can you talk about the problems?
I wrote an essay about that, I think about 2 or 3 weeks ago, that there seems to be a false dichotomy going around where men either take absolutely no responsibility or they take on way too much responsibility. And if you're currently sitting at 45% body fat and stuffing a McDonald's burger down your mouth, yes, you are responsible for being overweight. But you can, only to some extent, control the behaviors of another person. You can have a near perfect, you can have solid control of frame, you can know game, you can be a millionaire and a top 1% guy, and your woman may still cheat on you or divorce you. I mean, if you look at Hollywood divorces, you have guys who are in many ways in the top 0.01% of men, and they still get cheated on, they still get divorced. So the idea that you can control the behavior, well, the idea that you can, and this is my biggest issue with, a lot of the more conservative views, is that you are not Jesus or God. You are not omnipotent, omniscient, and omnipresent. So to think that you can control everything is just setting yourself up for either a delusion where you think you can actually control everything, or an illusion where you think you control everything and then everything falls out from under you. And you can control yourself and yourself only, and you cannot control the world, only your reactions to it. And that was a butchering of a Marcus Aurelius quote, but it gets to the point.
I had some people who were asking me some questions before I came on my comment threads on my blog, but one of them I thought was really interesting is one of the questions I think that I would probably put to Peterson is, does a family constitute a dominance hierarchy? And maybe that's something you want to answer, but it's, he goes into a lot about hypergamy being the source of male dominance hierarchies. And I agree with him. I think he's absolutely correct about that. I think that it is women who actually create the patriarchy themselves. Really, because they were evolved to do that way. They were evolved to seek out the best sperm and the best providership. But how does that transfer over, that dominance hierarchy, does that transfer over into a married relationship? Should the man be the head of the household and be the one that is looked up to and makes the decisions? I mean, we're going to talk about, wanting to, recreate this, maybe new form of idealistic marriage where we're going to save the planet and we're going to, save Western society and everything else by, encouraging men to, settle down, man up, and do the best that they can be and sacrifice as well as they can. But what is the exchange? Dalrock would say that marriage today is nothing but responsibility for men with zero authority, and all that authority goes over to the woman, and she's the one that's always making the decisions, whereas he's the one who is responsible for anything that goes wrong in that. It's the perfect buffer.
And you're an asshole if you have any disagreement with that or any kind of objection to that on top of that.
Right. So what my question to Jordan Peterson was, does a family constitute a dominance hierarchy? Should the man still be at the top of that list? Because from what I can see from some of his videos that I've seen where he was talking about how he settles disagreements and conflicts in his marriage, it seems like his first premise is to seek fault in himself. And I would say that goes back to, little boys being taught at an early age that, their gender is always the problem, that men are always the problem, and that we're always doing something stupid. And we need women's, unique correction. It's like the same thing for, in every damn sitcom, they're all Homer Simpson, or they're all, Dr. Huxtable, or they're all some ridiculous man who needs a woman's correcting influence to save him from himself. And only she can do that. And from what I hear, Peterson doesn't disagree with that so much. He wants to think that men find fault in themselves first.
No, he encourages it. As far as I can tell, he encourages that behavior. It's not as explicit maybe as other parts of the culture, but it's definitely there.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I'm looking at the chat. Go ahead, Carl.
No, I just got accused of being a nihilist, so I thought I'd put it out here that nihilism, and now the rejection of all religious and moral principles, often in the belief that life is meaningless. Saying you don't have control over everything isn't the same as saying life is meaningless. It's saying that because control is different from meaning, and control is different from principle. Accepting reality, part of that is accepting that you cannot control reality. If you look at all new technology, to use an analogy here, there is technology that is very new to us, and that we can make it sort of work, but we cannot control it. That's why you get nuclear power plants that blow the hell up, because we can make a nuclear power plant, but we still haven't quite figured out how to make one run without blowing the hell up. This isn't saying that you shouldn't try to make nuclear energy work. It's just saying that be aware of the risks and the limits of your control when you design them. Like if you're designing a nuclear power plant in an earthquake zone and the average earthquake has been 7.2 on the Richter scale, you may want to take into account, okay, we should proof it up until a 9 just to be on the safe side.
If you don't mind, just a quick one here too. I saw James Walker on the chat.
Yeah, I was just going to mention that.
Yeah, I don't get what they hope to gain by promoting a negative image on Peterson. Would they prefer men not speak about feminism? And I think that's missing the point.
Yes.
I know, and I think everybody agrees with me on this one, is that Peterson's just like any other resource. You take useful stuff and then discard the things that aren't useful. So the whole point of these talks is to sort out which is which.
Right.
So it's not about making him look bad so that he shuts up and goes away so Rollo can become Kathy Newman's vice or whatever. That's how you decide what you do that. Sorted out amongst other men. And that's all Red Pill is. You're swapping notes with other men.
Yeah,
what worked, what didn't.
That's why, and I think that's important to also understand too, is that I think that, and I've just been recently locking horns with guys about this, but people want to say that Red Pill is an ideology. Red Pill is not an ideology. Red Pill is a praxology. Okay. And what I mean by that is it's a study of, it's a study of behavior in that, from the perspective that behavior has some sort of meaning. Okay, this is what we do. Pretty much what we've been doing for a long time. We don't even realize that we're doing it. But the red pill, as far as I've been involved since, back in the early 2000s, has been an aggregate of men coming together and sharing their experiences, comparing notes, and then coming to, predictable, generalities about women and life in general as it is. So,
well, it's also specific because it developed in parallel to the PUA community, which was never as widespread and kind of deep. The red pill seems to have always been kind of harping on that.
Well, I've got a post called "The Evolution of Game," and I think it's in the first book as well. And it goes and it sort of outlines how we've gone from the early 90s and the players and the mystery method and RSD and all that kind of stuff from the early, and sort of how it's evolved into where it's become right now, because there's so much more of the red pill right now than just pickup artistry. And yep. I'm constantly accused of, oh, you're an MRA. Well, no, there's some things that I agree with MRA, and sometimes I might write about those, where they'll say you're a pickup artist and it's just about getting pussy for you. No, I agree with a lot of the game. I think game is a necessary aspect. I think game informs red pill and red pill informs game, but I'm not pickup artist. And then people say, well, you're MGTOW. You're finally coming around to being MGTOW. Like, no, I think that if you are red pill and you would come unplugged from the matrix, and you will have no other recourse but to cut yourself away from that and live in a different way. So does that make you going your own way? I think so. But does that mean you're going to stop? Yeah, but does that mean you're going to stop, having sex with women, or does that mean you're going to just give up on life and go be one of the guys jerking off and smoking weed and whatever? No, that doesn't mean you're going to give up. But it's just, I don't know. But I just getting to what this guy's question is. It's like, should we all just shut up and let this whole thing run out? And I think that a lot of misconception is I'm going to say some things that people are going to disagree with, and Jordan Peterson is going to say things that people are going to disagree with, and Roosh and Cernovich and whoever else you look and you have in your constant daily Twitter feed. Does that mean what their entire message and their entire direction is wrong? No, but I think that you should have a capacity to critically think about those things, and you should not be held back from expressing any kind of criticism about that. So, it's like saying what is it? No press is bad press. No, sometimes bad press is bad press. And if you don't believe me, just ask Subway about Jared as their spokesman. Okay, that's bad press. Okay,
yep. Ask Robert Fisher.
Yeah. So I think that when we get to when we get to the point where we have somebody who's above reproach and above criticism, that's when I start to open my eyes and I go, whoa, wait a minute. Go ahead, Carl.
No, a bit of a change of pace here, but there was a guy in chat who actually had a really good comment called Watcher Johnny, who says, I think you gents are missing an important point about Peterson. He's offering alienated young men a path to what they instinctually desire and are already conditioned to accept.
Yeah, and I think that as a starting point, that's definitely a good thing. I mean, it's good. When people criticize me, or I was giving like the Red Pill movie with Cassie J. I called that from a year and a half before. I said this movie is going to be all about her. It's going to, she's just using the MRAs to as a vehicle to further advance her career, and it's going to be about her journey of self-discovery, and it's going to have nothing to do or very little to do with the topic on hand. And sure as shit, that's what happened. But you know what people criticized me of at that time? They said, well, it's getting the message out. At least more people will come and try to discover what the red pill is. And they said the same thing about when Roosh went on with Dr. Oz. Well, it's a pretty damning episode of Dr. Oz, but at least people will come and find the red pill. Or they said the same thing about that CNN documentary. I don't even realize documentary. It's just basically a hit piece that was just around like probably about like a month or two ago.
2 months ago, yeah.
And people said, well, at least it's bringing people into yeah, okay, great, but from there, from once you're in, then what? Where do you go from there?
Well, clearly you keep all of your blue pill beliefs and you find red pill solutions to those blue pill beliefs, and you just live happily ever after.
Exactly. In fantasy land.
Yeah, until it blows up. Yep. So I wanted to ask you, I wrote it down earlier in my notes, Rollo. What is your comparison and contrast? This is open to anyone on stream, but Rollo, you first. Your comparison and contrast of someone like Stefan Molyneux to Jordan Peterson. How do those two compare in terms of
I just went on with Stefan last week, and I have to say I listened to Stefan and I like him well enough, but he's really kind of not in my wheelhouse. He is more politically and ideologically in sort of a different space than I am. We talked about the red pill. We talked about my book. We talked about hypergamy, and I think that in one respect, he is very much purple pill because he's very pro marriage and very pro. And I'm not saying that that's necessarily a bad thing, but just saying that's where he's at right now. And I think that if I was to ever lock horns with him, it would be over pretty much what we've been talking about here, which is, what's the end result? Are we trying to save humanity by convincing men to, put themselves out there, sacrifice themselves on the altar of what marriage really is today? And I think that in some respects, he's purple pill in that way, but like in other ways, he's very, very red pill. I was actually surprised. I expected there to be a little bit more conflict in our discussion, but it wasn't. He's more in tune, I think, with the MRAs, and I think he's more along their lines. And if I had disagreements with him, it would probably be the same disagreements I have with the men's rights movement.
Good. Just looking at some of the comments going here. There's so many shit ton of these weird ones too.
That's all right.
What, like that one on the stress how generational theory?
Yeah, I don't even. I'm not even familiar with that. Maybe Carl is, or some of you guys. So, what is the group's opinion on the Strauss-Howe generational theory?
It's a theory.
I'm not familiar with it. I wish I could.
Me neither. Carl?
Come on, nerd, give us something.
Come on, Carl, give it. He's looking it up.
I'm not intimately familiar with it.
I'm surprised.
Yeah, but in essence, it's a theory device where you describe a theoretical generational cycle in the United States that tends to repeat.
Oh, this is like the what is that thing? That book that Bannon was a huge fan of. That thing? The Fourth Turning. Yeah. Okay. Sorry to interrupt.
I don't see how it's applicable.
How can you give us
something I actually wanted? Not to interrupt, but there was actually one thing that struck me with what Rollo was saying that I thought was very interesting, and is, are you familiar with the is-ought problem?
Yeah.
Yes. Yeah.
Yeah, and that was one of the things that struck me about marriage, is what marriage is today versus what marriage has been and what people think marriage ought to be. Because I think that's a major sticking point for men, that they only think of marriage as being one thing. It's kind of being a man. Part of it to them is growing up. And if you're not married, then you haven't grown up. You haven't become a man fully. And that's marriage as sort of a metaphysical concept, I guess. Right. But then you have marriage as it is, which is marriage surrounded by all these laws, regulations, and state influence, which is what screws men over. And then you have the illusion that they have before getting screwed over, which is of what a marriage ought to be. Their retirement from the sexual marketplace, someone who loves them unconditionally, someone who was saving the best for them, something that they were debating and waiting for. And I'm just throwing a couple of Rollo references there.
Well, I was going to say is that sort of comes back to what I talked about in the Male Catch-22. I have a post called, it's a chapter as well. It's called The Honor System. And it's pretty much the man up or shut up dynamic, where it's as long as masculinity and manhood is something that can be useful to women or the feminine imperative or womankind, then that's an approved aspect of masculinity. But anything else that would conflict with feminine, or the feminine imperative, anything that would conflict with empowering women, anything that is an all in any way contradictory that is an aspect of masculinity or being a man, that is restricted. And so what we were just saying a little while ago is like, if you're not married, then you're not a real man, right? The path to manhood is to prepare yourself for marriage. And then after marriage, that's what that's what grants you manhood status, right? And so it's like holding hostage what manhood really is. And I really think that what you're doing at that point is you're only affirming the truth of somebody else. And in this case, since we're talking about Peterson, and I could also throw Dennis Prager in here because he's now aligning himself with PragerU. It's that same dynamic. It's man up and marry those sluts. And if there's anything that detrimental to yourself that happens after that, well, that's on you. And like I said, when Dalrock was talking about how marriage is really 100% responsibility for men with 0% authority for men, nobody's going to sign up for that. Guys are instinctually deductive problem solvers, and they're going to see that before they move into making a sacrifice such as that.
It's an opt-in problem. Yeah. In fact, all of this kind of ties to I think I got it from you, where you have to be your own judge. All these things you're saying where men have to be judged, like the feminine imperative says this, the feminine imperative says that, only if you accept it. Like, if you don't get married, you're not going to have the problems of marriage. That's your own masculine. And that's how I interpreted your masculine center, the way you talk about it.
Well, it's like the sacrifice of men is, when Prager
do for me and don't worry about you.
Yeah. Exactly. Well, the sacrifice for men, it's really a parallel to men being disposable. We're talking about the disposability of men. And, again, that goes back to sperm is cheap and eggs are expensive. And I think that, men will blow themselves up so that they can get pussy. Okay. So, we're talking about that degree of sacrifice, that I will sacrifice myself for a greater cause because I think I'm going to get 70 virgins when I arrive in heaven. Okay.
Which is kind of like a weird validation seeking behavior when you think about it.
Well, and then
to win her over. It's the Disney fantasy with a bomb strapped to your chest.
Exactly.
It's fucking ridiculous.
Yeah, here I come, Ariel.
And it's the one part where we call them first generation MGTOW because the second generation is just, I don't even want to play, but just don't opt in.
Yeah.
You do these things, you have your own center. And yeah, you're right. Women are a monopoly, the Berfolt's Law thing, but they're not a monopoly like Microsoft. They're a monopoly like a restaurant. You can eat at a restaurant, they tell you what you're eating, but you can always just go to another one. There's 3.5 billion women. There'll always be one more. There's always going to be another one. So if
there's a lot more than one. There's plenty.
Yeah. Well, that's the thing. If the deal gets untenable, if it's due for me or else, you're not a real man. All right. Take care. Sure. This one over here will think a little bit different and go for that. And that's the whole point of like not being the provider that cleans up your room instead of being a hot guy who lifts weights, looks hot, does well, smells nice. Because then you have those options. And so then all you need is one girl out of all these ones, or however many girls that don't browbeat you into being the plow horse for them. And you can be their company for as long as your turn is. And then when it's over, it's over.
The great irony is that women love fucking alphas with dirty rooms that aren't tidy and kept up. The rooms are a fucking disaster half the time. The guys are impulsive, have a bunch of tattoos, have a rap sheet, half a mile long, like that. So he's telling you all this stuff, and it's just like,
it's not practical.
Well, let me tell you something else here. Sorry, Carl, let me get back to you a bit. I've seen videos where Peterson is talking about how women aren't really into bad boys. I mean, they like the dominance hierarchy, but they want the guy who is ultimately going to be the good provider. Is going to ultimately be the good. It's real, like again, like what we were talking about before with the lean in with the Sheryl Sandbergs. They ultimately at the end of the day, nothing sexier than these guys, right? Because they have their shit together and they have a clean room and they have all this stuff. And I think that he kind of sweeps the alpha fuck side of hypergamy under the carpet. I've seen his video on hypergamy, and almost almost to the exclusion of everything else. It's all about the beta need, beta provisioning, parental investment side of hypergamy. I'm not saying that that's not an important part, but he completely ignores the fact that there is an app called Tinder, which basically facilitates the alpha fuck side of hypergamy
in a very binary way. I mean, it's literally left, right. It's like alpha, beta. Like,
and I don't think I have ever seen him be critical of women in their selection of that, other than when he brings up the 50 Shades of Grey, and he uses that quite a bit, saying, well, women, will still want the bad boy and everything, but at the end of the day, the sacrifices you make are going to make you a good, like a beta with the side of alpha.
You don't want that 3 a.m. booty call because you can have breakfast the next morning.
Yeah, and again, that sort of comes back to, in a way, that sort of shames women in a sense, because it says, well, I know you want to follow the Sandberg plan for hypergamy, but in the end, you're going to want to marry the guy who's got a steady job and a clean room, right? Well, the fact of the matter is there's plenty of post-divorce women who turn into cougars, because that's simply not true.
Yep. Hey, guys, I want to hit on something that I think is pretty simple, but really important for the guys watching to understand. And I don't know if it was Ryan that posted it the other day, or Rollo, or someone else on the Red Pill subreddit, but basically someone said that feminism is not the blue pill. And I think that's what a lot of guys that really love Jordan Peterson miss, that are also familiar with the manosphere and the Red Pill, because he rejects a huge majority of feminism fiercely and in public to the tune of millions of people, and yet he still has these blue pill ideas. So can Rollo or Ryan or Carl, can you guys talk a little bit about what exactly the blue pill is and why it's not just feminism? Why being anti-feminist doesn't make you red pill automatically?
Nah.
Because I think it's how. Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, no, to expand, I guess it's the whole point of a red pill, blue pill is the red pill side is you're getting what you want. You have a goal. Then for a 21-year-old guy, his goal is pussy, as much as he can possibly get. So if he's cleaning his room, he's not getting it. So that's what it means by blue pill. It's not an ideological camp. It's not an identity. It's not a clubhouse. It's just, are you actually getting what you're going for? If you're a 30-year-old guy and you want to raise a family, then maybe getting some long-term provision thing going is your plan, in which case that's also red pill. If you're doing it via a marriage that's probably going to blow up in your face, then it's not red pill at all, because you're not getting what you want. You're giving a girl a divorce settlement and a baby. It's not at all what you wanted.
Well, the way I look at blue pill, and I've written about this for some time now, is I see blue pill as sort of a societal social engineering that's really, I think, started taking place right around the time of the sexual revolution. And once we had freed up hypergamy, and we have we have systematically since that time have systematically made efforts socially to feminize men and to masculinize women. And in the beginning, that was because we wanted to have some notion of equality between the sexes. So we had to like disempower men and then fempower women. And I think that the blue pill has so many different manifestations in that sense. I think the easiest one to see is like I was talking about before, and in positive masculinity, I talk about how it takes a village to raise a child. Well, that village is the blue pill. That village of your teachers, the society itself, social media, popular psychology, just basically all of the outside influences that are working on in this instance, young men, who will soon be young men, a 5-year-old boy, and conditioning them to be that perfect beta provider when they get to be, when a woman hits her epiphany phase at 29 to 31 years old, like what Carl was saying. I've got a post called Betas in Waiting that pretty much outlines that. And I think that the blue pill is everywhere, really. That's why we call it blue pill and red pill, because it's like the Matrix. It's the reality that you're growing up in right now. It's maybe your single mother, or your overly feminist aunt, or it's the overwhelmingly female teachers that you have from the time you're in kindergarten all the way up until you're done with your last year of college. And it's this systematic conditioning of men to be these perfect providers, just like what Carl was saying, is like, it's so, how do you condition generation after generation to be that perfect provider and be that engine of society, and yet, you know, it's, you know, 80% of men are beta and 20% of men, I would say, are, you know, on the alpha side of things, and it's the alphas that are still getting laid. But how do you convince those blue pill, you know, beta men to stick with it, to not go their own way, to stay on the plantation, to do, you know, what it is that they've been raised to do? How do you do that? Well, it takes it takes a village, and it takes a long time to do that, which is why we see kids getting indoctrinated earlier and earlier. So you see a kid who's in 5th grade, you know, whose assignment is list all the reasons why you hate being a boy. I mean, that's blue pill right there. And cutting yourself away from that, cutting yourself away from the Disney fantasy of being, you know, having the perfect girl, or having your one-itis girl, or your soulmate. I think a soulmate position is, you know, soulmate myth is definitely a big part of that. But why is that? What's the functional purpose of the soulmate myth? Well, it's to say that there's one person for everyone, right? And so what does that do? That goes back to what Carl was saying about monogamy and keeping that market balance there. So we have social conventions that are blue pill that keep men locked into that matrix, so that they, you know, that they become the 45-year-old, you know, suicide, because they're zeroed out later on, because they followed that path for the, you know, for most of their lives. So when I come out there and I talk about open hypergamy, or I talk about what I do, I'm a threat to that system. And I think Jordan Peterson is definitely a threat to that system as well. So in that respect, yes, he's very much red pill, because he's breaking men away from their teaching, from their early childhood education in the blue pill. So yeah, if he's doing something very, very positive, that's the thing. And if he brings guys to a greater understanding of, you know, red pill awareness, then that's great too. But for, you know, like, again, the whole reason for this talk is, you know, a critique of where is he going with that. So if all I ever knew was, if I broke myself away from the blue pill, unplugged myself from the matrix, and all I ever knew was Jordan Peterson, where do I end at the end of that? Where am I at what decisions am I supposed to make to get me to the idealized life? You know, what decisions am I going to make that will be in line with with being a Jordan Peterson guy? This is exactly why I don't do prescriptions. Guys always hit me up and say, well, how come you don't do a 12-step to be a red pill guy, Rollo? How come you don't, you know, what's the secret to manning up in the red pill? In fact, I got a post coming up about that. I don't do that. I don't do prescriptions, because I want you to be the guy that you are supposed to be. Okay. So I can tell you how to be Rollo Tomasi, and probably, you know, Carl and Anthony can tell you how to be, you know, Carl and Anthony, but, you know, they're not going to tell you how to be the best you. You have to make those decisions, because, like, I'm this, you know, 49-year-old white guy in the United States. I can't tell some dude in you know, South Africa what he should be doing, or some guy in India, or some guy in China, you know, because I don't know that culture. There's so many different variables. But what I do know is I do know hypergamy, and I do know you know, red pill awareness, and I do know, you know, intersexual dynamics very well. And those things don't change culturally, or, you know, from culture to culture, or from, you know, racial to racial.
Because they're based on biology.
Yeah, because they're based on biology. And you're going to be dealing, you know, men and women have been dealing with each other since the dawn of time. Okay. So I like I said, I don't give prescriptions, and I'm always wary of guys who are giving prescriptions.
Here's an open question that I have for all of you guys.
Let Carl go.
Go ahead, Carl. Go ahead.
Yeah. No, I was going to. This is one of the points that perhaps me and Rollo disagree a little bit on, but I define the blue pill somewhat broader. Because I like to define the blue pill as any indoctrination or ideology that actively seeks to put individual men into a servant role in society, in fact, turning them into means to an end for their society, rather than their society treating them as ends in itself. And that might sound a little bit complicated, but what I mean by that is, if you're indoctrinated, you need to get the college degree, you need to be a loyal employee, you need to be risk averse, etc. These are all different things you are told by society in order to make you into a better citizen. And this was a major topic in my last essay, where I say that the things that make you into a good beta husband are the exact same thing that make you into a great employee in a factory or in a cubicle. You're there every day, they can rely on, yeah, and that's the blue pill side of it. The red pill side of it is saying that, you know, there's an alternative to being a plow horse or to be a means. You need to actually say that, do you even want the life they're offering you? You work every day, 40, 50, 60 fucking hours locked in a cubicle, and your reward at the end is a couple of divorces, a couple of kids that hate you, and a meager pension that you can't live on, and you end up being a Walmart greeter at age 78.
And the kids might not even be yours, or only half of them are.
And you'll still be paying for them.
That's kind of...
Yeah. Yep.
Yeah, and that's kind of the thing, that Freud has this amazing way of putting it in Future of an Illusion, where he says, if you want someone to work, to put away their base instincts in order to build a civilization or a society, you can either reward them for acting the way you want, which is the soulmate myth. You're told that if you do everything we tell you, you will get what you want in the end. And then you have the punishments, which is saying, okay, you either do what we want, or we're going to put you in jail, or we're going to kill you, or we're going to kick you out of the tribe.
Mm-hmm.
And since about let's say the 1900s, we started to graduate toward more rewards than punishments. Because if you go back to the kings of old, if you told the king, fuck off, I'm not giving your army money, okay, he'd go, okay, but then we're going to kill you and we're going to take it anyway. And lately we've been saying that, you know, if you're a good boy, we'll give you a reasonable salary and we'll give you a predictable life, and you won't have to deal with the dirtier side of things, and we'll even throw you a wife and a couple of kids. But just produce
give them a cow and a wife
for our society. Because we have to remember that the one thing that this society is driven by is GDP growth. If your GDP doesn't grow, that means that the interest payments on your national debt is going to increase, become a bigger and bigger part of your GDP, which means your society is going to go down in wealth, not up. And if your society goes down in wealth, that means you suddenly have a lot of kids, a lot of women, and a lot of dependents on that society, that instead of relying on their family, are relying on the collective. Because that's the brilliant thing about social democratic and communist states, is instead of saying, okay, each woman gets her own plow horse, they say that, okay, you know what, we'll just collectivize the plow horses and we'll split their work evenly among all of you. So it takes away the risk of relying on one man, and it just, yeah, it takes away the risk. It's really that simple. And that's the blue pill to me. It's just turning men into commodities rather than individuals.
Yeah, it's like dehumanizing us as slaves. What is it? I think I don't know if it was Rollo that said it. Thank you. I don't know if it was Rollo that said it, or it was Ed Lattimore, or somewhere else on Twitter, but someone said about Rollo's work that Rollo is like teaching slaves to read. And it drives people up the fucking wall.
Yeah, so. I have a post called. I actually wrote an essay about that too.
Okay.
I think that I'm looking at the comments here, and I think that there's one saying, you know, well, this sounds like it's loneliness, or if it's red pill, then I don't want to have anything to do with it. You know, that it's possible to have good marriages, and yeah, it is possible to have good marriages. And I will tell you right now that, you know, I get this all the time. It's like, if I am in any way critical of marriage, it must be because I have some horrible marriage, and I just really, you know, I'm just venting or I'm projecting. And no, I have a great marriage. I've been married for 21 years, and there's, you know, we're doing good. But, you know, I also know that there's, you know, countless other guys who are exactly in the same position that I have been in, and, you know, they say, I can't believe she did this to me. She turned on me. I can't, you know. So I'm not ever going to say that a woman can't go feral on you or can't change. But, you know, just because a couple stays together does not necessarily mean that is a great, healthy, functioning, you know, marriage. And just because a family gets together on Thanksgiving and Christmas does not mean that they are not a dysfunctional family. And I really think that if you are married, or if you are considering getting married, and I would I will advise against doing that. But if you are, I would say that the only rational, real way to go about that is to make sure that you are red pill aware and you understand just what Carl was just talking about. I don't think I would disagree with you, Carl. I think you just approach it from a more sociological level than I do. I look at things from intergender dynamics before I look at anything. But I think that, can you have a successful, good marriage? Yeah, you can. And you know what? It's still a risk. It's still, the risks are still there. And I get this shit all the time from MGTOW saying, oh, well, Rollo he's in the relationship because it's just cheaper to keep her, And I'm like, no, I mean, it's a lifestyle. It's a lifestyle.
It's the guy who's probably never lived with a girl. They are cheap.
Yeah.
Well, we should also lose. We should say too that Rollo brought his wife to the 21 convention, and lots of speakers and attendees met her over the course of like a week. So this is all verified. Like, this is 100%. Like, people were very happy to meet her. So
guys on the plane were meeting her.
Well,
yeah, that's right. That's right. Yeah.
Well, I would like to say too that the idea of cheaper to keep her, that bothers me on some level, because let's say you've had 30 to 40 years of good life left, and you have the choice between you can have 40 years of total misery, or you can have 40 years of having a reasonably happy life with a little less money. I'd say number 2 is the better choice.
Yeah,
but it's not even that. We have a couple.
Go ahead,
Finish your thought. Sorry.
No, Einstein said it very well that, if you want to understand the relative nature of time, think about the fact that spend a day with a beautiful woman and it feels like a second, but spend a second with your hand on a hot stove and it feels like a day.
Eternity. Yeah.
Because here's the thing too, you're right. It's actually not cheaper to keep her. We've had not a large amount out of the 10,000 or so guys in married red pill. There's maybe half a dozen guys who are divorced. And the one thing they're unanimously coming back is my disposable income has gone up even after I have to pay for her to leave me. And it's just one of those things they realized, like, I was so worried about losing half my stuff, but I realized I was losing half my stuff within the marriage. Now that I'm out, like, I have to give her however much gross from the alimony payments, but now that I got all this money that's mine, I don't have to waste it.
Yeah.
So it's not even that it's cheaper to keep her. And I think that's just an excuse guys use because change sucks, risk sucks, because if you leave her, that's the chance that might be the last girl you ever meet, which is ridiculous on its face, but guys believe that. And if they would just embrace that, you're going to be fine either way. Like, there's some horrible stories. I think Rollo even had one on Twitter, or one of the guys there gave us his personal story in DM, and it was just tragic shit.
Oh God.
But now that she's, I don't want to go into details because it's fucking brutal. But then even that, now that he's been single on his own, he's doing way better than he would have been there in that life of quiet desperation.
Right.
Yeah, half the marriages end in divorce, but half of those other ones are quiet desperations in man caves.
I just did a like Thursday night. I did an interview with Craig James and Hunter from the 21 convention as well. And as you might guess, we talk about marriage and parenting and stuff, and from a red pill perspective. And I think it was Dean Abbott had some guy hit him up about how he was in this relationship, or he's in this long-term marriage, I guess, and essentially what it boiled down to, and Hunter, to his credit, called this out, is that this guy was trying to sacrifice his way into a good marriage, and meaning that he was giving up as much of himself as he possibly could, was trying to, be the perfect, endlessly trying to be this perfect guy and trying to give her more, and, trying to buy her something, or buy her things, sacrifice, do more chores, do, whatever else, any way he could possibly sacrifice himself. And Hunter called it, sacrificing your way to a good marriage. And I'll tell you right now that that's not the way to get to a good, if there's nothing left of you, polarity is the key to a good relationship. You need to have that, that separation between the man and the woman. And if you start turning into a woman, that's going to be the key to you getting, put away by that woman. But again, the reason I bring this up is because, again, it goes sort of back to what Peterson was saying about sacrifice. Where do you end? When you become a Peterson guy, where does that end? Does that end in you being in this marriage? And if so, when you're in this marriage, are you constantly sacrificing your own identity to be, to be in this perfect marriage? I mean, how far are you willing to go? What do you think is going to be appreciated? And what do what degree of sacrifice is acceptable for you?
I want to say something pretty controversial.
Well, if peace is your ultimate archetype, then apparently crucifixion is where it ends.
Yeah. Well, well, that's why I wanted to ask that question. Is like, is there a dominance hierarchy inside of a marriage? That'd be the first question I would have for Peterson.
Well, here's something that you said, Rollo, a minute ago. What's making me think of this anyway? And it's based on a comment, too, that someone left in the live chat maybe 20, 30 minutes ago. Mm-hmm. From my understanding of the red pill, and particularly your work, Rollo, as well as Carl, blacklabellogic.com, if anything ever happened to Jordan Peterson's marriage at this point, like some sort of infidelity, I'm not saying it would. It may or may not. It can happen to anyone. But if it did, his blue pill conditioning behind or related to that would just destroy him. And that's what the comment said from just one of the comments watching this video. I mean, do you guys think that's accurate based on what I believe it's accurate based on what I've seen of him? But does that make sense to you guys?
Always trumps logos. Always. Him being that like archetype that they're looking for, the TradCon hero. If he loses that, of course he does.
Yep. Well, so he's in a very fragile position.
Think people are reading Young now at like record rates because of Peterson? No.
Yeah.
They're looking at this. They see a guy who's married, has the job, the kids, the white picket fence, likes memes. Oh, yeah, it could be me.
Yeah. Well, I also think that, I agree with that assessment. I think that probably he would definitely have a blow to his identity and his ego. Simply, like let's just say for sake of argument that his wife were to leave him. I think he is in the prime. He'd be a prime candidate for what I write about in being zeroed out. Yep. And maybe he wouldn't be completely zeroed out, but he fits an archetype, and that's what I wrote about in that. And also I had another essay called Male Suicide or Men in Suicide, and that post was the result of an argument I had with a feminist who was trying to tell me that it's men's fault that they are killing themselves in record numbers, or that's 5 times the rate of women. And I said, well, what do you think about the fact that it's men between the ages of 45 and 65 who are killing themselves in the highest proportions that they've ever done, and it's no longer teenage suicide anymore. It's all about, those guys. And she didn't have any answer for that, but I did. And my answer is that these guys get zeroed out. They go and they build their lives around a blue pill, like just what Carl was saying, a blue pill paradigm, and they do everything right. They do everything by the book. Like I was saying in the second set of books, that guy who set himself on fire in front of the city courthouse, to basically did this self-immolation and left this manifesto why he had done it. And it was pretty much the fact that, there are 2 sets of books. There's the books that you learn when you're a kid, your blue pill books that you learn when you're good. And they're all about the old social contract and things that you're supposed to do and the rules you're supposed to play by. And then you will receive X, Y, and Z as your reward, and it seems like a pretty good deal. But then later on in life, you understand that nobody is playing by those rules, and it's the new set of books that are, that everyone is really playing by, and you're going to be a victim and a consequence of that new set of books if you don't, come to the realization of the fact that you're not playing by those rules. Now, I'm not saying that all men are victims of blah blah blah. No, I'm not saying that. I'm saying that you can certainly be a casualty of the old set of books if you are living your life according to that old social contract that those rules that nobody are playing by right now. And so consequently, guys who build themselves up and they make themselves, if you look who is Jordan Peterson? Look who is Rollo Tomasi? Who is, Anthony Johnson? You are the sum total of what your experiences are up to this point. Mm-hmm. Well, if I go and I zero all of that out and I say, okay, you no longer have the company anymore, and you no longer have any of the stuff that you built yourself up. And guess what? The marriage that you thought was so important that somebody told you was the most meaningful, important document you'll ever sign in your life. Guess what? That's gone too. And like everything that made you who you are, and I'm not just talking about like investing yourself in just, oh, well, you shouldn't think about women, right? Well, think about all the other things that you invest your identity into, and then think about having all of that stripped away when you're 45, 55, 65 years old, when you're supposed to be being rewarded and enjoying the fruits of your labor, so to speak. And all of that stripped away and gone, and to add insult to injury, now you've still got to pay the price for all of that. You not really getting that and not really understanding that. You got to pay the price for that for the rest of your life. You might.
And everybody's telling you it's your fault.
Yeah, that's the worst part. You might kill yourself, or you might turn to opiates, or you might turn to which men might in my demographic are turning to like never before. Or you might be alcoholic. You might kill yourself. You might kill your kids and your wife, and then kill yourself.
Or shoot up a gym, or Elliot Rodgers, or whatever, or some variation of that.
Again, it goes back to that what I call the myth of relational equity, and that we build all of this. Our wives will never leave us because we're the perfect guy, right? We're exactly who Jordan Peterson told us that we should be, right? We're this perfect dude who makes our bed and does the right things and makes the right choices and defers authority to our wives, and does all of this stuff by the old set of books, by the old social contract. And yet here I am, completely zeroed out at 45 years old. What I have two choices. I have two choices. I can rebuild myself from scratch at 45 years old, or I can just put a gun to my head and call it good.
Yep. Guys, it's getting pretty long here. We're past 3 o'clock, so I think we'll need to start winding down. I did want to end this though on a question I thought was pretty positive and pretty interesting. I think positive. What do each of you think, if anything, about Jordan Peterson's effect on the Overton window? So the window of acceptable discourse and discussion on a wide scale for not just feminism, and criticizing it and blasting it for the shit it is, but also things like the Red Pill community, which I think is a lot more. It's not just more pure, but it's more intense and more hardcore than what Jordan's talking about. And it's still small. It's like what, 250,000 strong, on the Red Pill subreddit. So what do you think? So what do you think his effect is on opening that window of discussion by destroying feminists on Vice News and Kathy Newman and all that?
I think the good thing.
Go ahead, Carl.
I think the good thing about Jordan Peterson is that he's a bit like Steven Pinker when it came to the blank slate. He's kind of a non-threatening guy who's very well-spoken, very calm and collected, who can bring some of these facts that are politically incorrect into the common discourse. What I think the problem is with both Pinker and Peterson, you have a broader part of the explanatory framework that they will not touch. Like Pinker won't touch, for instance, IQ in the way that and what the data says on IQ, and Jordan Peterson is sticking with just the odd numbers when it comes to intersectional dynamics, because he knows the entire data set, but he's only using the part that confirms his ideology. But I think
and his personal life history too.
I think Jordan Peterson is a great gateway drug for the Red Pill, because I think a lot of the people who find Jordan Peterson are going to end putting a search term into a search engine that will lead them deeper down the rabbit hole. And I think that's a good thing, because, it's one of those things that society is not lacking people who are sheep, who follow the narratives and conform to social expectations. It's lacking critical thinkers. And when they get a brick through their Overton window, then they might go looking for who threw that fucking brick.
Here.
And
okay.
Sorry, Rollo, go ahead.
I was just going to say, because I just to touch on what Carl was just saying a minute ago, I feel you. I would add to that list. I would certainly say Pinker is one of these guys that really frustrates me. And then also like Dr. Warren Farrell, who wrote The Myth of Male Power and Why Men Are the Way They Are. I actually attribute Warren Farrell to my sort of unplugging back in the mid 90s, way back when I read Why Men Are the Way They Are. But he's very frustrating to me in the same way that Pinker is, and the same way that Peterson is because they have this information and they have this truth that's just sitting there that they've been instrumental in not just exposing, but just sort of thinking about and developing. And yet they are not willing to go make that next step. Like Pinker self-describes as a feminist. You know, I'm very much a feminist, but yet he pretty much destroys egalitarian equalism and the blank slate. A guy like Dr. Warren Farrell very much is extraordinarily red pill when it comes to intersexual dynamics, but just still falls into the same trap that MRAs do, which is they still think that they can be perfected feminists. Like we can still have this perfect egalitarian equalism across the board, which I just firmly disagree with, because simply there is biological and psychological differences between men. You know, cats aren't dogs. But it's like, again, he won't make that step. He won't go and renounce, feminism. He wants to still try to, we can all collectively come to the table and work together. And he wants to negotiate real desire. Well, guess what? Women don't want to negotiate real desire. They just want to have organic desire for you. I think that if Jordan Peterson has a very positive effect on anything, it is definitely his opening the eyes of a lot of guys. And that's why I've always been kind of reluctant to even be all that, critical of him, because it's opening, like I said, it's opening guys' eyes and it's bringing them into a different discussion that they've never heard before. And then definitely I agree with Carl when he says that it's drawing a huge target on him. And I think that, going from being a professor at University of Toronto, wherever he is, to being this internationally known intellectual, and having that sort of instant, it's strange to me to say that he's like almost like a rock star right now. It's just sort of come up in the last, 2 years. And then having to deal with that. And I know that he suffers from depression. I know that he takes medication for depression. And I think that he's going to, at some stage, he always says, in fact, just in the Vice interview, he says that his greatest fear, his greatest worry is that he's going to say something wrong to a guy in an interview. Like he was afraid to death that he was going to fuck things up with Kathy Newman, or even this guy that, the Oriental guy that was interviewing him. But I think that if that's his greatest fear, there's something more going on, I think, behind the scenes with him, because he's got it all down. I think he's going to, overall, I think Jordan Peterson is a net positive. I just think that guys need to be a little bit more aware of just some of the things that the direction that he's leading. Where do you end up as a Jordan Peterson guy?
Yeah.
100%.
And the best thing about, and I wish more people would take this lesson, he is the smart man's Corey Worthington.
Yeah.
And I think that Kathy Newman interview should teach guys exactly what Chateau was talking about, I think in 2014, is that game is not just going to be about getting women anymore. It's a life skill that every man's going to have. And if you read that, we have a theory that he actually has studied mystery method or some kind of pickup. You see him doing pressure flips, amused mastery, agreeing and amplifying, and you're seeing it right there where, for example, Robert Fisher, the creator of the Red Pill subreddit, got put on that spotlight and he just crumbled. Yeah. But you watch Peterson put the same way he would, if Newman was a chick that he met at a bar and he was sarging his way through it, that's exactly how that would have gone. Mm-hmm. And you see right there how that picking up a chick at the bar is completely applicable to handling yourself in the public sphere. And I think if more men learn game, all this stuff's kind of going to go away, because they're going to naturally just fit that role. Like everything is game.
Yeah, I think
more need to take it.
A lot of guys like that, like if you go and you look at Julian Blank and you looked at what happened to him when he was, accused of sexual assault and everything, and he had to go on TV and sort of, apologize for it and do this complete 180 and sort of, do a run back of what he probably would have done, in as an RSD video or something, and pretty much run that back. I think that's a risk that Peterson is going to run into. I don't think he's going to do that right now, because he's got nothing to lose. But once he has something to lose, once he has some investment and some equity in being Jordan Peterson, the internet persona, once he has something to lose, he's less he's completely anti-fragile right now. I mean, he could say pretty much anything he wants, but that's because he doesn't have anything to lose at this state. And I think that's going to be something that in the future he's going to have to really deal with.
But does he need to have something to lose?
No, I mean, he doesn't need. Yeah, it doesn't need to. Yeah. But like, at what point does he say something wrong? at what point does he say something that alienates his audience, his following?
Yeah, the cult, they're going to be the ones that tear him down too. It's not going to be some feminist with some crazy argument. It's going to be the people that made him dad 2.0.
Yes.
They built their god, and they're going to tear him down just as fast.
It will come from inside.
Yes. Kill the father.
Mm-hmm.
Well, not because it's any other analogy here, but one of the interesting things, I read a book recently by a guy called Steve Hassan on cult behavior. And one of the things he pointed out that was so interesting to me is he was a member of the Moon cult. Rollo, you're probably familiar with it. And one of the interesting things they were saying about the Hare Krishnas, those people are fucking brainwashed. And the Hare Krishnas were saying about the Moon is, those people are fucking brainwashed. And they didn't put the same kind of they couldn't recognize the symptoms in themselves. And I think that's what might happen with Peterson as well, that he's going to get to a point, like Rollo says, where he says something that alienates a large part of his base.
Right. Well, if you look,
as long as he sticks with his base, he's anti-fragile.
Well, if you look at, when we were discussing in the earliest part of this, we were talking about how, men are sort of primed right now for guys like Peterson, but you should also, Peterson is one of many right now. He's the most visible, obviously, but you also have to look at guys like Tony Robbins. You got to look at guys like the guys from RSD who are trying to be, the pickup artist version of Tony Robbins. Yep. You're looking at a rise of this, for lack of a better term, a cult-like mentality where guys are going to go there, and because they're getting that need met. That Tony Robbins meets a lot of the same needs that Peterson hits on. It gives them direction, gives them some sort of purpose. Because they're purposeless. So he's basically it's the perfect. It's a perfect marketing strategy. What do you have? You see a need, you supply a need, and that's what's going on with those guys.
All right.
And there's a dog.
Yeah.
I should get my dogs in here right now.
Every red pill man needs a sighthound at some point in his life.
Yes.
It's just
I hear them fooling around out there right now.
Yeah.
All right, guys.
One of the things I kind of had a quick note about here. One of the things I had a quick note about was the idea of explanatory frameworks, because the way many men find the red pill and find Peterson, etc., is that they've been told a certain narrative of how things are going to go that explains if you do something, then this follows. And a lot of guys find the red pill or Peterson because they do something and it does not follow. Like you, Anthony, you're a great example, because you become more red pill because you observe the fact that the remnants of blue pill thinking were just simply not correct.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. Your work and Rollo's work were instrumental in that too, to just bit by bit, minute by minute, going through it.
Yeah. Well, this has been good, man. I think we should probably do this again.
Yeah.
Thank you very much for the invite. This is a blast.
100%. Carl, what'd you say?
Second.
Okay. All right.
No, I was going to go on a digression that might take us forever, but it's just a case of it was just dealing with the fact that it's becoming extremely visible in our culture, the fact that what men have been told and what's happening are two different things. Because you get the Match.com data, you get the OkCupid data, you have books like Datanomics, and you have Tinder that has a Gini coefficient. That's a distribution of likes that's worse than any country on the planet. So it's becoming very visible and very objective to men that what you've been told, even if the framework explains some of what you observe, it doesn't explain all of it. And men, being deductive problem solvers, will want to figure that out.
Mm-hmm. It's almost like the cognitive dissonance that the blue pill generates in men today is it's going over like a dam or a threshold. It's getting open hypergamy is getting and open cuckoldry is so fucking bad at this point. But yeah, it's crossing that line now, I think.
Yeah. Like when I was talking with Pat Campbell, we were talking about that CNN article about open cuckoldry, and I'm like, it's not something that I wasn't predictable. I actually wrote a post about that. Open cuckoldry would be the next step in open hypergamy. And it's funny you should say that, because it's not going to be guys like me who are going to be the most impactful when it comes to opening guys' eyes to, you know, the red pill and hypergamy. It's going to be women. It's going to be TV commercials. You know, it's going to be Super Bowl commercials where they're, you know, it's all about fempowerment and everything else, or it's going to be like active, open, in your face examples of hypergamy.
Yep. All right, I think we should kind of wrap up. Any last words, gentlemen, before we kind of head out?
I think we need to do this again.
Oh fuck yeah. This is a very good time. Very fucking good time. Everyone, thanks for tuning in and joining in, of course. Carl from blacklabellogic.com, Rolla Tomasi from therationalmail.com, Ryan Stone, you can follow on Twitter. Not sure of the exact handle, but if you type in Ryan Stone, RIAN, you'll find them.
_Ryan_Stone.
Okay, there you go. Also, actually, in the video description underneath this video, all the links are there right now to the website. Websites, all of them. So, you guys are good to go. Cool. Appreciate everybody hopping on, tuning in. We had over 1,000 viewers tune in over the past 2 hours.
God damn.
One of the most ever. So, good shit.
All right, man.
All right, stay on the call, guys. I'm going to end the live stream. Everyone else, see you next time.
Peace.
Yep.